Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein will meet with President Trump at the White House Thursday. The meeting comes amid questions over how much longer Rosenstein will remain in his post. CBS News Washington correspondent Paula Reed has the latest.
We'll be determining what's going on. We want to have transparency.
On the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York, President Trump would not say if he was going to fire his Deputy Attorney General.
I spoke with Rod today, and we're going to have a meeting on Thursday.
But earlier in an interview, the president said firing Rosenstein was being looked at.
We will make a determination, but it is certainly a very sad story when you see it.
After FBI Director James Comey was fired in May 2017, Rosenstein appointed former FBI Director Robert Mueller to oversee the Russia investigation, a decision the president has criticized repeatedly. The New York Times reported Friday that around that time, Rosenstein suggested recording the president and possibly invoking the 25th Amendment to remove him from office. A former justice official told CBS News he remembered Rosenstein making a comment about recordings, but he felt it was sarcastic. Rosenstein flatly denied any suggestion of ousting the president as absolutely false.
How do you not address that?
On his radio show, the president's personal attorney, Jay Sekulow, suggested that if Rosenstein resigns or is fired, the special counsel should pause his investigation.
I think it's really important that there be a step back taken here and a review.
A firing would also add political turmoil for the administration ahead of the midterm elections.
Well, I think if he did something like that, it would cause a furor that I don't think we need right now.
That was Paula Reed reporting. Joining me now are Rebecca Roiphe and Andrea Bernstein. Rebecca is a professor of law at New York Law School and a former assistant district attorney in New York City. Andrea is a senior editor and co-host of the Trump Inc. podcast from WNYC Radio. Season 2 of the podcast premieres Wednesday. Welcome to you both. So much to get through. Rebecca, let me start with you. What impact would Rod Rosenstein's departure from the Department of Justice, if it in fact does happen, we don't know, what impact would that have, though, on the Mueller investigation?
It would have a huge impact. He is probably the most important person, next to Robert Mueller himself, involved in the investigation. It is his job to oversee it, and there are decisions, important decisions that get made that he has to approve, and if he is not there and somebody else there, it could make a very big difference in this investigation and the future of the investigation.
And so, Andrea, what happens, though, if Rod Rosenstein stays? Does that affect the investigation, you think, at all? Is there a way to know?
Well, if he stays, it looks like it's status quo, although I do want to say one caveat. Right. I just said it's really hard to predict the future.
That's right.
We are in uncharted testimony, in territory here.
Right? Yes.
We have legal
concepts on the mind. Yes.
But I think what is really important is to sort of look at how much has been laid bare because of the Mueller investigation. Dozens of people indicted, including Russian nationals, top aides of President Trump now convicted of crimes because of this investigation. So we know a whole lot more about what happened in the campaign and what people around Trump did than we did when Mueller was appointed in May of 2017. And it's been an enormous exercise in truth-telling, which I think has been very important for all parts of our democracy, and we've learned things about both parties that are unpalatable and that potentially could lead to change.
And you know, Rebecca, what are some of the challenges that Rod Rosenstein has had to navigate in terms of overseeing this investigation so far?
I mean, Rod Rosenstein has sort of been caught in crossfire in this situation because he is, in many ways, just a professional who has had done this kind of work for ages, and he's trying to protect the work that the Department of Justice does. At the same time, he's under political fire, and he has been for a very long time. I think that some people have suggested that he hasn't always stood up as well as he should to the White House, but I think he's done an actually pretty amazing job of bending a little bit, but protecting the rule of law and protecting the way this prosecution and the way that it's proceeded.
And help us understand, Rebecca, if in fact he were to resign or be fired, what would happen in terms of the succession? What are the factors that come into play when you're talking about who would take over if Rod Rosenstein leaves?
Well, there are a couple of issues that are kind of complicated, but the next in line is Noel Francisco, who is the Solicitor General. Now, Noel Francisco, there are some discussion about how he himself might have to recuse himself because his former law firm that he worked at did some work for the Trump campaign. So if he recuses himself, the next person in line is Stephen Angle, who is an assistant attorney general, works for the Office of Legal Counsel, which is actually the Office of Legal Counsel, sort of notoriously one of the most politicized subunits of the Department of Justice.
And we remember that from the Bush administration and the debate over torture or enhanced interrogation techniques, et cetera. Andrea, let me ask you about your podcast, Trump Inc. spent time last season delving into the president's former personal lawyer, Michael Cohen. For people who have not heard it, I suggest you go back and take a listen to that episode. It is really fascinating to hear about Cohen and his history in New York City and his business ties, especially, which you and your colleagues go through. What do you make now, Andrea, of some of the reporting by some outlets that, in fact, Michael Cohen is cooperating with Robert Mueller?
Well, I think that since the last time I was here, the huge drama with Michael Cohen pleading guilty and saying in court that he took actions that were illegal at the direction of President Trump is a really stunning development. And I was there in the courtroom. I mean, obviously this wasn't easy for him to say, but having decided to do it, he's all in. And he is saying what he knows, and he does know a lot of the president's business secrets. So I think a lot of what we're about to learn could be very, very interesting. I just also wanted to comment on the rule of law. I think that what is going on in this country with all of these prosecutions in the context of the President of the United States, sometimes it feels like on a daily basis, undermining, discrediting, causing people in his own Justice Department who are investigating Russians, who are involved in counterintelligence. It is a completely different environment from anything we've seen in recent history. And this Rod Rosenstein potential move is just part of this. And I think it is very concerning for democracy when there is no sort of oxygen and room for law enforcement to do what it needs to do.
Yeah, I can't imagine what the atmosphere must be like in DOJ right now. But Rebecca, let me go back to Michael Cohen. How is Bob Mueller, based on the experience that you have as a prosecutor, how might Bob Mueller be using what Michael Cohen knows to help with his own investigation?
Well, I mean, there are a couple of ways in which prosecutors use cooperators, and one of them is to directly use them as a witness. So the way that Rick Gates testified against Paul Manafort, that's the most traditional way, but they can also use a cooperator to help connect dots and to provide information that they don't otherwise have. So Michael Cohen particularly, has a lot of information, as Andrea said, on business contacts, business ties with Russia and what Russia's involvement was, but he also may have inside information on something, on some piece of the obstruction case. So if he was part of some conversation in which Trump discussed pardons or something like that, there may be some key element that witness can provide that no documents or no other person can give to him.
And what about, Rudy Giuliani says that Michael Cohen is not credible. How problematic is that for Mueller?
Well, I mean, it's more problematic if he gets up and testifies in court than if he helps Mueller to put together pieces that they already have. If they rely on his testimony, they're going to have an uphill battle in building his credibility. I think that's absolutely true. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but it's hard. And prosecutors are very trained at having very bad cooperators, because that's just kind of the way it is. Most of the time, your informants, your cooperators are not nuns and saints, and you have to use what you got. So my guess is they could do it, but there are also other ways in which it wouldn't necessarily come to play.
And Rebecca, some have compared Mueller's investigation to an organized crime case. Do the agreements reached with both Paul Manafort and Michael Cohen, as well as other Trump associates, give us any insight into where this investigation by Bob Mueller is actually heading right now?
Well, I mean, the way in which it's similar to an organized crime prosecution is that there's a constant flipping up. So we're rolling people up to the top. And it looks like that's what's happening. There aren't that many people up above Paul Manafort and Michael Cohen who are left standing. So that's one way in which it resembles an organized crime prosecution. Another way is that, look, these are syndicates, like organizations, criminal organizations, in which there are lots of different things that are going on and lots of different potentially crimes that are being committed. No one person knows everything that's going on. And so you've got to use all of these cooperating witnesses to build the case. And so in that way, it does look very much like a traditional organized crime prosecution. Of course, there are other ways in which it's not. There are documents and offshore accounts and money being moved, and all of those things make it look more, of course, much more like a white-collar criminal prosecution prosecution than organized crime.
So much more of this picture not complete yet. But Andrea, I know on Wednesday, season 2 of Trump Inc. premieres, looking at GOP fundraiser Elliot Broidy. How does he fit into Trump world? Give us a quick preview.
Trump Inc. is an open investigation. We've been looking at ways the Trump family business may be profiting from the administration. This season, we're expanding out to look at the people around Trump. Michael Cohen is one of them, who made money by selling their access to the presidency, and examining what seems to be a sort of rolling off of a cliff of acceptance of people blatantly profiting from the administration. So that's what we're looking at, and we're asking people for tips, and we're going to be taking a long look at these people and trying to make a deeper portrait than we have now of this whole milieu that the president is operating in.
All right, a lot to look forward to. Rebecca Roiphe and Andrea Bernstein, thank you both. Great to have you here.
Thank you.